What's up, Ego Hackers? This is C.S. Joseph, and this is the C.S. Joseph Podcast, Season 30, Episode 1. And we are going to be discussing the hypocrisy of the 16 types. So, hypocrisy is an interesting animal because when you consider, episodes or content that I've done in the past discussing hypocrisy, you'll note that I'm usually calling out Templars for hypocrisy, or some of their hypocritical actions. But hypocrisy is something that all of the 16 types struggle with. And this is especially true with the ESTJ, since this episode is all about the hypocrisy of the ESTJ and what to do about it, right? So, ESTJs, adjudicators, direct, initiating, outcome-focused for their expression. Their worldview is SJ worldview, which means they're all about guardians and personal safety and being careful, sometimes having their head in the sand. Anything that is normal trumps anything that is not normal. Whatever is unoriginal is more important than what is original, for example, because original things could be scary, untested, something that would make them uncomfortable. It's all about comfort zone, right? Well, just like Templar types, they too carry their own form of hypocrisy. And hypocrisy literally, is just defined as you've become the thing that you've sworn to destroy, or more accurately, you've gone out of your way to judge other people for doing something that you do on a regular basis. And that could be a problem, especially when it comes to ESTJs, because they end up taking status hits for such behavior. But the thing about hypocrisy when it comes to Jungian analytical psychology is that people lack such self-awareness that unless they're receiving criticism or feedback of some kind from other people, they're not really going to know how much of a hypocrite they are themselves. And granted, at least the ESTJ can look in their past and run a comparative analysis with their TE hero, SI parent combined, to be able to come to better conclusions about what happened and comparing their self from years ago compared to their self now. And they could actually have an opportunity to figure out, okay, yeah, I was a hypocrite here, here, and here. Even to the point where when they look back on the past, they can cringe. Cringe over, wow, did I really used to be that way compared to now, right? Well, this is necessary because of growth, right? And luckily, ESTJs have a strength in this area where, due to being a high SI user, they can actually keep track of the growth that they have had in their life, which is more than what most people could actually say for themselves. I mean, imagine like an ENTJ doing that, right? And that would also be problematic, or an ENFJ, or any NJ thereof. They have a really hard time even being mindful of where they've screwed up in the past to where they have now. But when it comes to ESTJ, if you think about it, what kind of gross negligence does a person have to get to, within their own persona, within their ego and their ego investments? What kind of gross negligence is there for such a person when they can already look back in their past and judge themselves accordingly and keep course correcting based on failures of the past and successes of the past in order to stave off hypocrisy? How is it possible that an SI parent type could still walk the path to hypocrisy itself, like everybody else? How is it possible? What, pray tell, could happen there? Well, it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, while they can look into the past, they can't see into the future so well, their own future, with an eye trickster, right? And oftentimes they are actually unaware of the decisions that they make. So like, it's the point where they are unaware themselves of, oh, I might be a hypocrite if I do this. It doesn't even occur to them. They don't even think about it. They don't even think about the risks. Because from their point of view, it's like, oh, I'll do it. I have faith in myself. Anything that I've been able to handle in the past, I'm good. No problem. I can be above reproach. There's no issue there. I don't have any problems with this. And at times, they can end up making decisions or judgments based on faith alone and with a lack of planning. Even though they're very outcome focused and they can be all about plans, but sometimes those plans get completely shirked, or those plans are something that either they didn't plan for everything, or it's just not important to them at that particular moment. This usually happens when an ESTJ is going out of their way to make themselves look good, right? Or they're protecting their ego investments. And that's one area with which they can be a hypocrite. So we've learned recently in season 18 the concept about cognitive reflections or reflector functions, and how important reflector functions can be when it comes to deciding, hey, where am I within my own personal growth? Where is my development? As like a way to test a person's development, right? We also know that cognitive orbits used to teach people lessons and gain access to functions in the ego, because the shadow or the unconscious is a lot more accessible. The ego is not going to go out of its way to defend it. But if you were to attack or criticize or provide feedback for any functions in the ego of an ESTJ, they're going to defend it. They're going to defend it tooth and nail. And this presents a difficulty for most people. So oftentimes, people have to employ social engineering techniques like the ones stated in season 21 to even get to the point where, we can deal with this person's hypocrisy. But it's not enough. It's not enough to point out another person's hypocrisy by any means. The reason why is because if you can't get a person themselves to see themselves as a hypocrite, then you're basically wasting your breath. And the downward spiral of them protecting their ego investments, which is what usually leads to hypocrisy, ends up becoming the norm. And if they are incapable of it, the fact that they would defend their ego and actually defend their own hypocrisy, it causes them to fall deeper and deeper into hypocrisy even more. And a lot of people don't even realize this when it comes to hypocrisy, and how people are just oftentimes on this continued downward spiral. And I think this is why it is written, do not throw your pearls before swine, because when anyone is dealing with hypocrisy, that they literally become swine. And just calling them out on it will literally cause hatred, right? And of course, given that an ESTJ is as I parent, that level of hatred could lead to a high amount of bitterness. And then they'll take it out on you later, or they'll take it out on completely innocent people that have nothing to do it anytime they become indignant. And indignance is basically reacting negatively to perceived unfair treatment. It doesn't mean that they're actually being treated unfairly. It just means that they perceive unfair treatment. And that perception continues to be a problem over time. So please keep that in mind, is that when you criticize someone or provide feedback, especially when it comes to hypocrisy, you can end up making the situation worse. So there's an old biblical example from the book of Proverbs that King Solomon talks about. And it goes something like this: if you correct a wise man, he will love you. But if you correct a fool, he will hate you. And this is why it's never a good idea to correct a fool, because he will just get worse in his folly. He won't actually contribute to anything. You will only be basically confirming his suspicions. And that's a huge problem, you know. And with ESTJs, well, that's where their hypocrisy is. Suspicion. Extroverted sensing critic is supposed to be wisely aware of what other people are doing. And it's their job to make sure that other people are being precise, kept, capable, and are putting in effort. The problem is that the ego can become inflated. SI parent, which has the ability to put up with and suffer many things throughout life, many hardships, and endure, is that the SE critic in its immature form as the senile old man or old woman, etc., in its senility, because it's also known as the Scenics, as was taught to me by Robert Bryant and Robert Moriel in my 20s, that senility is what ends up causing the ego to become inflated, such that SI parent, when combined with FI inferior, becomes entitled. And it becomes entitled to other people's effort, or at least entitled to the expectation of people putting in the same or similar effort. And from the ESTJ's point of view, they see this as just. They see this as normal, which reminds me of the parable of the vineyard. So within that parable, we begin to see how, like, a man, he has this project on his vineyard, and he goes into town to hire people. And he's like, hey, I'm going to pay you XYZ thing. Go work on my thing. And the guy's like, okay, great, I'll do it. So he goes and he hired a worker. And the project is going on in his vineyard, and things are moving along just fine. So then the man, the owner of the vineyard, goes back into town. He's like, oh crap, I got to hire more workers. So he goes into town and hires more workers. He pays them a little bit more, and they get back on to the project. And then all of a sudden it's about lunchtime. He's like, oh dang, we're not going to finish. I had to go back into town and hire more workers. So he leaves, he goes back into town again, hires more workers, and he pays them an increasing higher amount. And then he comes back home with the new workers, and they're able to get the project done. At the end of the day, it comes time for people to get paid. And there are some dudes there that are hired on early in the morning, and they're getting paid the least, but they have put in the most time, compared to the guys hired later in the afternoon who only got paid a small or a much larger sum, but they only worked for 2 hours, for example. And then the men who were hired at the very beginning of the day, who were paid the least and worked the most time, that is, not necessarily worked the most, but put in the most time, came to the owner and started complaining about unfair wages. The problem is that the owner was like, okay, who are you to tell me how to run my vineyard? Who are you to tell me how to spend my money? You agreed to that amount. That's on you, right? And then the owner's like, do I not have the right to pay people according to their capability, their skill level, their experience, or to pay them in any which way that I want to, regardless? You know? So a lot of people talk about things like, like wage gap, for example. Wage gap, which the wage gap discussion is hilarious, because how could a wage gap actually exist? Because if it exists, why wouldn't businesses just hire women, right? Gotta love that, gender equality that doesn't actually exist in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't. It's a myth. Gotta love those myths that we build our society on. Just like the soulmate myth, another myth that we build our society on. Well, ESTJs all end up having this problem where they end up behaving just like the guy who was paid the least and put in the most time. Because, ESTJs have within their head this very oligarchical viewpoint of, well, I earned my place here in the old boys club, so I reap all of the benefits. I worked the longest, I have the most time spent, so I should be the one that's promoted. I should be the one who gets all the benefits. Not that young whippersnapper who just joined the organization, who just joined the business, right? Yeah, they did join the organization. They did join the business, but what they don't know is that this young whippersnapper who's making double of what the old ESTJ is making, well, they're trained in different levels of technology or different marketing techniques that are more current to the time. See, that's the issue with SE Critic. SE Critic, when it's senile, ends up enabling the ESTJ, such as the ESTJ ends up specializing in one thing and one way of doing things, to the point where the ESTJ ends up having a tradition set up within their own mind. But the true purpose of extroverted sensing critic is for it to be wise. And when SE Critic is wise, it makes itself out to become more relevant. Which means if the ESTJ is going out of their way to be focused on continuous improvement, for example, they would be spending time and researching what other people are doing within their own field at all times to stay up to date. Getting an ESTJ to stay updated, or at least to be a generalist instead of a specialist, is extremely difficult. Now you're like, well, wait a minute, C.S. Joseph, I thought they have NI Trickster, and isn't it hard for NI Tricksters to specialize in anything? Wouldn't NE Child be more general and be more open to a generalist? Absolutely it would. The problem is that SI parent, especially when it's in an SI teenager mode, that SI parent ends up becoming lazy, and then it becomes to this point where it has super high expectations, and it gets stuck in its comfort zone, and that comfort zone leads to specialization. And that could be a major problem, because when an ESTJ becomes super specialized into one thing, they're actually destroying their value. And in order to protect their FI inferior for the fact that they themselves have destroyed their own value, they end up going out of their way to lower or reduce everyone else's value around them so that they can stay relevant. And that's what SE Critic does. They end up criticizing other people's capabilities, other people's work. It's like they become super competitive out of nowhere, and they work hard to eliminate competition, especially in a job situation. And they eliminate that competition. So they'll block people because ESTJs almost always end up in middle management, and they'll block certain people that they perceive as threatening to their position, when it comes to, even though they've earned it, when it comes to like promotions, for example, they never do that. Or they often sabotage other people within the organization. This includes, management or people that work under them, etc., because they've become so entitled to their own position and entitled to all of the potential growth in front of them, because their FI inferior is like, well, I deserve this. I'm valuable. This is for me. When if they were wise with their SE Critic, they wouldn't be so concerned about that, because they'd realize, oh crap, I'm not valuable. And then they should actually spend their SI on making themselves or keeping themselves relevant by staying up to date on all the new techniques and new ways of doing things. And this is why you have, people calling old men old codgers, because they're stuck in their ways. You can't train an old dog, new tricks. That's where that comes from. It's literally ESTJs. Those sayings, those cliches, are talking about those cliche ESTJs who have become entitled and accustomed to their specialization to their comfort zone. And instead of keeping themselves and making themselves more capable and able to perform well like they did in their youth, what they'll do instead is spend all of their time and effort and do the expedient thing instead of the meaningful thing. And they will hypocritically do the thing that they are criticizing everybody else to do. So they're like, oh, that guy's not putting enough effort. He doesn't deserve the promotion, right? Also because the ESTJ is afraid of that person becoming their boss and then ultimately firing them, because the ESTJ themselves is aware of how irrelevant that they have become. This 45 to 55-year-old ESTJ working for a Fortune 500 company. It could be like a big financial institution, like a bank, for example, right? And in this moment, they're like, oh, crap. Yeah. And they become the thing that they've sworn to destroy, effectively. Because they would rather spend time eliminating competition or eliminating threats to their position, to their status, to their value, instead of putting in time to make themselves more valuable and more capable. Because they just get lazy like that. And they're like, well, I'm really old, or I put in a lot of time. I deserve this. I deserve to have this. These young whippersnappers, they don't deserve this. And so this is one of the reasons why, ESJs, especially ESTJs, are the number one type out of all the 16 types that disrespects the youth. They are constantly disrespecting young people. This is why you have ESTJs like Joe Biden, who are constantly all about his old boys club at the expense of the youth. People often talk about how it's really lame how older people have sold the youth downriver and saddled the youth with debt, etc. It's because the same 1950s thinking that led to the 60s and people like Joe Biden and their thinking is that they're trying to preserve that as much as possible. Joe Biden cannot accept, for example, just how irrelevant he actually is. And it's weird to me because people are afraid of actually admitting it. Because, he's just a poor old man. I'm like, yeah, I could see that. But not when you're the president of the United States. Oh, Mr. C.S. Joseph, I can't believe you're saying things against Biden. Well, if Trump was still president, I'd be making fun of Trump. So don't worry about it. If you're a president of the United States, you're going to feel the sting of my tongue, because I will stab you with it. That's reality. Like, a lot of people just don't understand the consequences of their actions. So ESTJ hypocrisy basically leads to society itself being sold downriver, because that is what, in effect, what the boomers have done to the younger generation. They have sold us downriver. I wonder what the younger generation is going to do to the boomers when it comes time for whether or not the younger generation is going to take care of the boomers in their old age. Maybe that's why the boomers are going out of the way to take as much that they can from the youth, because they know that they're already doomed to be in the nursing home, and they'd rather get as much money as they can and much resources as they can to kind of glide out of life, etc., as much as they can, because they know that the younger generation is not going to forgive them. They know that the younger generation is going to be treating them very harshly. So because of that, they're trying to take as much as they can. Like pirates, take what you can, give nothing back, right? From the younger generation. I graduated from university in 2008. I had $120,000 of student loan debt to my name. It's a very bad time for me. I was paying over $1,800 a month in student loan payments as a basically as a 21, 22-year-old. And I was able to keep it together through, forbearance and deferments of loans for a while, until eventually I just became homeless. And that led to the second bout of homelessness that I had in my life. The first bout wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, I was just on my own for a little bit after getting out of the home for the first time and going to college, etc. But for a while I was living on my own, and then I had to like it's almost again, and I ended up in like a garage. That was really tough, cold, embarrassing, with an infant, mind you. But I survived. I got through it. You know. But definitely, when it comes to the older generation, I got a lot of stored bitterness against them for what they have done. Like, how could they have allowed that in 2005? It's the only year that this was able to happen. But when I got my student loans in 2005, they were subprime variable interest rate. So that by the time when I actually paid off my student loans a couple years ago, when I finally had paid them off, I was looking at 10% interest rates on student loans. It was by some miracle that I was able to actually pay them off, right? Well, to be fair, I followed the Dave Ramsey debt snowball plan to the letter, which was good. And I didn't spend any money at all except on debt. So now my student loans are paid for by some miracle. 34 years old, never owned a house, and you know, and I bought myself a vehicle. It was only the second time ever I bought myself a vehicle. You know, like, I've done what I can to survive. You know, some people argue, well, Mr. C.S. Joseph, you're still responsible for signing your name on those loans. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am. And I take full responsibility for that, stupid. But at the same time, I was also being heavily pressured by society, heavily pressured by my parents to sign, you know, the dotted line. My dad is a very harsh and cruel man, which is a bad thing, but it's also a good thing in many ways. And it's through that harshness that, you know, I was able to grow and get out of my introverted sensing inferior comfort zone, which I do appreciate him for. In some areas, I wish he was harsher. In other areas, I wish he wasn't. Some things were just unnecessary. But I had like literally zero self-esteem whatsoever. But it's not even really his fault. It's those beyond him. He's not even retired yet. He's not even 60 yet. You know, it's the generation before him who set all that up and who conditioned him into having this, you know, high desire for his children to have education, where it's like, hey, you know, we're going to do whatever it takes. He made me take the SAT so many times and said because I was lazy and because I didn't study, I couldn't get a good score in SAT. You know what's funny about that? I ended up getting the same exact score on the SAT that he did every single time I took the test. That's ridiculous. Very ridiculous. That was a 1080, by the way, back when SATs were calculated by 1600, then it was calculated by 3200, then it went back to 1600. Who knows how they score it these days? Whatever. I wish I never did it. But that's the point. I'm trying to show you, like, from a micro level what the hypocrisy looks like, and then what from a macro level what the hypocrisy looks like. And ESTJs, you just have to understand, like, you have to be wise with your critic such that you are going out of your way to keep yourself relevant. This whole idea that later in life you get to rest on your laurels because you quote unquote earned it, that's actually a lie. And you're causing other people to suffer because you feel entitled to resting on your laurels. Because in your youth, you judge everybody else, the SC critic, for not putting in enough effort. But then you, later in life, you rest on your laurels and you're not putting in enough effort. And you're expecting the younger generation to pick up your burden. It's so interesting that your golden pair, the ISTP, is the complete other way around. They are deathly afraid of becoming a burden. And they never, ever, ever, ever want to be a burden. in any way, shape, or form. And that's something you, as an ESTJ, need to realize. They go too far in that direction, but you're the one who ends up creating a burden, and you create these burdens for the rest of society. $2 trillion of debt, I lay that at your feet. That's not even considering interest payments. That's not considering other budgets. It's $2 trillion. They'd have to go to King Solomon, and King Solomon would have to pay all of his gold to pay off all of the debt for the United States of America. People are like, well, Mr. C.S. Joseph, well, how can you blame ESTJs for that? Because when you have ESTJs like Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, you have ESTJs like Joe Biden, for example, right? It's extremely common of an archetype. The ESTJ is the most presidential of all of the 16 types. That's why they're the most often voted for. And that's the issue. That's the main problem. And, y'all rest on your laurels. Stop resting on your laurels. It turns you into hypocrites. You're so critical towards everybody else's effort and them not putting in the effort. But when it comes down to it, you yourself are not willing to put in the effort to stay relevant, to stay capable. And you get lazy. And you get so upset at everyone else not doing the meaningful thing, but you do the expedient thing all the time. It's annoying. No wonder no one really wants you around when they realize that. No wonder the young people get together and they rebel against you ESTJs in your old age. This happens all the time. All the time. With even members of your own family, where you, the ESTJ, end up in a nursing home because you've done that to your own children and they know it. And what would happen if you have a child who's a Templar type? Ooh. What would happen if you have a child who's a Crusader type? Ooh. Because one way or another, I promise you, justice will be served. You will reap what you sow. I promise, ESTJs. You need to get ahead of your own hypocrisy. To do this, you have to stay relevant. You have to be putting your effort in the right thing. You have to be putting your effort into doing what is meaningful. And what is meaningful, again, stay relevant. Go to the training. Learn the newest techniques. Keep yourself capable. And even if you're at a point where you're not even working anymore, you don't have a job, or you're not working for that company anymore, and you think to yourself, well, like, it's a completely different landscape. I used to do marketing a long time ago. We'd send mailers inside of people's mailboxes, but now I have to learn about sales funnels. Really? Yes, ESTJs, really. Because if anything, you need to be grateful enough with your FI inferior and show gratitude enough to become a professor of marketing in this particular example, so that you could teach the younger generation marketing. Because the principles of marketing are still the same. It's just the techniques are different. Learn the new techniques so that you could teach the young people those principles. That way you stay meaningful. You stay relevant. And then the young people won't see you as someone who's resting on your laurels. The young people won't see you as this person who is taking advantage of them, who is betraying them, or as this person who is a hypocrite. That's what's important. That's what should be important to your FI inferior. And if you're not willing to use your subconscious to do what is meaningful and share via gratitude the principles behind the techniques that you knew, so that not only are you able to stay relevant, but you're also imparting upon those principles to the young people so that it keeps them capable, so that they stay meaningful as well. You're supposed to be this meaningfulness conductor in life and making everyone else meaningful. But the second that you rest on your laurels, it becomes a race to the bottom. You become so hypocritical that everyone around you becomes the average, because you are making yourself average. And then as time goes on, you become below average, and that destroys the value and the average of everyone else around you. Kind of like what I talk about with the cartel of the mature feminine, right? The cartel of mature feminine is that HOA. If one of those houses is not following HOA rules, it reduces the entire value of the neighborhood. Well, that's what you're doing. You're reducing the entire value of your reputation and the reputation around you, because you're no longer reliable. Because a reliable version of you is someone who overcomes their own hypocrisy and stays meaningful. And for some reason, you don't. You don't stay meaningful. And that's a big problem. It's one of the reasons why our world is so screwed up. It's because ESTJs don't want to do the honorable thing. They want the quick, easy thing. They want to rest on the laurels, retire, and play golf for the rest of their life at everybody else's expense. Everybody else's expense. Let me tell you something, ESTJs. You didn't earn a damn thing. You think you earned your home? You think you earned your property? Do you really actually own anything? There's these laws called eminent domain, where you still have to pay property tax on your property, and if you don't pay property tax, they take your property from you. So in reality, you're just actually renting everything you have. The only thing you're not renting is everything inside of your mind. And that's what's important. But if you're not going to be sharing the principles that you've gathered in your mind, if you're not going to be helping other people in your life build their I win button for life by sharing your principles with them, you're a hypocrite. And if you're going to go out of your way to prevent them from growing themselves, because what's literally happening, and this is the root of your hypocrisy, ESTJs, you're supposed to be going out of your way to make yourself more relevant and meaningful and stay up to date with ways of doing things so that you could be a top performer, continue to be a top performer, and then help other people perform. But if you don't, you end up stifling everybody else's performance around you. And then you actually, instead of growing yourself, you're preventing other people from growing so that you can stay the same. And that's the problem. Just like when you have that ESTJ manager that doesn't want to promote the guys working under him because he's afraid that they would eventually fire him one day. He wouldn't be so afraid if he kept himself relevant and current with the techniques of the days, and be going out of his way to share those principles and improve the younger people around them. But because he was acting out of fear, he ended up stifling the growth of other people around him. And that's how they eliminate competition. That's how ESTJs eliminate competition. They slow or prevent the growth of other people so that they always stay above those other people, while at the same time they themselves don't have to grow. Welcome to the ESTJ hypocrisy. Do not be that person. Do not live life that way. Otherwise, you will be severely punished. And a nursing home that you can't leave is just one of those things awaiting you in your future. But you can't see that because trickster. I highly recommend you avoid that outcome by taking up those principles that you've learned throughout your life, learning what the new techniques of the day are, teach those techniques with the principles that you have learned, make a better I win button for others, and share it, because SI is supposed to learn sharing, right? Share it with them. And then as a result, they won't rebel against you. They'll celebrate you. They'll take you to highest heights. And then you're no longer a burden on them. You're a contributor. That's what's most important. And you know what that looks like? Guess what? ENFJ, angelic. ENFJ, superego, right? Going out of its way to teach the next generation and become the great teacher. That, my friends, is how you destroy hypocrisy while simultaneously also becoming the best version of yourself. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please leave a comment below. It'd be awesome. Welcome to season 30, folks. I hope you will enjoy it. It's going to be a fun one for me too. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.